welcome to another episode of A Questioning Mind. I'm your host, Sagarika, and joining me today is Ashish Kulkarni. Ashish, welcome.
Namaskar, how are you?
Well, thank you, and thanks so much for joining us again. We have a lot to discuss since the last time. It's been a while. Ashish, as most of you might know, is one of our very popular guests and is an expert at the genetics aspect of determining the Aryan migration theory, the other ancestries of our population. And with population genetics being such a technical term, we hope that it gets a little more simplified through these videos. If you like this video, please do like and share this information. And without much ado, Ashish, let's begin. So you have a ton of blog posts that have come out since the last time. And the few that make most sense for this discussion are likely going to be one of the questions I had was about the Rakhi Gadi samples. What does your
Hmm.
analysis about those?
The Rakhi Gadi sample, I think, is from the period around 2000 BCE, and the ancestry of that is typical of also of what we found from migrant samples that were there in Shahir Sokhta, which is
Mhm.
Iran, and from Gonur site around 2000 BCE. They are basically uh, composed of few ancestries, one of which is Iran Neolithic ancestry, which could have been present all over Iran and India since maybe 7, 8,000, 10,000 years ago.
Mhm.
And the other part is the something which we know, which we call AASI, which is the ancestral South Indian component, which is basically been in South India or East India since a very long time at least. It may have been there in the north, but we don't know yet. So
Right.
essentially, it is composed of two major chunk of ancestries and minor ancestries from Siberia and Anatolia are present. So four ancestries you can say, one relating to Iran and North India, the other to South India, the third to Siberia, and the fourth to
Mhm.
Anatolia. This is what we call distal modeling, as in uh, distal components far, uh, but these may not actually be the proximal exact sources through which this ancestry was formed. But broadly and generally speaking, these are the four distal components of the Rakhi sample. And I think in modern India, 50 to 60% minimum ancestry of most Indians is comprised of ancestry similar to this Rakhi person. It could be even
Right.
more for other populations. So the major chunk of ancestry in modern Indians is from a population which is similar to this Rakhi sample.
All right, so we might just have found a lot of our ancestors, and you have some conclusions to make that are rather contentious, according to a lot of commentators in the space.
Right. So in 2019, there were two papers specifically related to India which came out, which basically said which were the first ancient samples from Indian related samples to have been published.
Mhm.
Those papers were Narasimhan et al. 2019 and Shinde et al. 2019. And so Harvard was basically involved in both these papers. And the samples that they are talking about are IVC migrants from Shairi Sokta, these migrants, there are I think 8, 9 migrants, which they call Indus periphery samples. Their ancestries are different from the other samples at those sites. They resemble Indians somewhat. So the hypothesis, which I think is correct, is that they were migrants from India or say Pakistan or Afghanistan. Those are semantics. But their conclusion was that there's no Anatolian ancestry present in those samples.
Mhm.
Uh, there is a recent paper which has come out, which is Mayer et al. 2022. It's still in preprint. That posits that there is 5 to 7% Anatolian ancestry present. Now, this is important in a few. Plus, there's another paper by Dilek Koptekin, who's a Turkish PhD student who recently published a paper, and it's there on my Twitter today. I spoke about that. that also finds some Anatolian ancestry in the Shair Sokta samples. Now, the thing about the Rakhigadi sample is that it is a low quality sample. So, out of 1 million plus
Hmm.
snips, they call it, there's only 30,000 or so present. So, not a lot can be deduced from that.
Hmm.
Um, so, what we do is we analyze the Shair Sokta samples because they have a much better quality and much better coverage, and assuming that those represent a population similar to the Rakhigadi populations. Based on that assumption, we analyze Shair Sokta samples, and based on that, we make our conclusions. So, what I'm finding is that there is definite Anatolian ancestry present. Now, this is important because in Shinde et al. 2019, basically Harvard must have written this part. They said that there's no Anatolian ancestry. So, they reject a path of ancestry coming from the west of India through Iran into India. So based on that, they reject the hypothesis that which is still posited by Colin Renfrew, Paul Hegarty, and these people of an
Hmm.
Anatolian homeland of Indo-European languages, which would have come via
Hmm.
Iran, South Central Asia into India. Now, if they don't find any Anatolian ancestry, they can now clearly and easily say that that route is now out of the question. So the whole purpose of those papers and that analysis was to, firstly, basically to deny that route, so that only one route which they agree with remains standing,
Hmm.
which is the route from the north via the steppe via South Central Asia into India. So I'm
Is
finding that not to be correct. Many recent papers are not finding that to be correct. There is definitely Anatolian ancestry in Rakhigadi as well as the migrant samples from Shire Sopra. So essentially, their conclusion that a western route of Indo-European languages into India, it still remains open. Now the thing is, 5% Anatolian ancestry might be small, but Anatolia, Turkey is quite far away. It wouldn't have come, in a pure form. So
right, right.
mixed with the Iran Neolithic ancestry on the path, it would have at least given 30-40%
Hmm.
ancestry to those samples. So that's a big enough ancestry to cause a
Is it
change in languages if we do hypothesize that. So that route still remains open. It was closed as a conclusion of Shinde 2019, but that's not true. And Harvard itself, that Mayer 2022 preprint is by Harvard itself. David Reich is also a part of that paper. So they themselves are now reevaluating whether that's true or not. And I am basically saying that that's definitely not true. There is Anatolian ancestry present. There's no doubt about it in my mind.
right? So the Southern Arc paper. Let's go there next. I think that has some bearing on this as well.
So I think what we should do is we should start with giving a broad idea about why various theories exist, and then based on those criteria, we should discuss some papers so
All
that
right,
people who
let's go with the theories and the people involved. Like you said, Harvard is one of them. I think the Planck Institute is also something that we
have.
have studied. They have the opposite view. So let's have the players involved and the theories, and then go on to the papers. Sure.
The first thing is that I'll spend less time of this on this. The proto-Indo-European homeland is supposed to be the origin sort of region and a common group of people who, in some manner, expanded all over Europe and Asia and gave the various modern Indo-European languages that we see today. Right. So there are various theories about it. One is the most famous theories right now are basically some East Anatolia, Armenia as the homeland. I think this has gained mainstream favor. Even Harvard is shifting towards it. The other theory was the north of Caucasus, so just north of this Armenia region. The other theory was the steppe origin theory. So that region is the lower steppe of the Don and Volga region of South Russia. So these are the two mainstream theories. There are other theories which are Balkan hypothesis or the out of India hypothesis or Iran hypothesis. These are some of the other theories. The step theory was the major proponent was Professor Gimbutas. I think that's what they pronounce it. Maybe I'm wrong. She's now no more, but then it has been taken over by proponents such as David Anthony uh, and James Mallory and others. Harvard also, at least in some aspects, believes in that theory. Now, the problem with that theory generally is that the before 3500 BC, 4000 BC, the people of that steppe region in South Russia, they were hunter fishers. They were basically had a very high fish diet, and they didn't they didn't even have cattle. They didn't have agriculture. Agriculture is a much so it's a very hard theory to sell that the origin of those languages were of all these modern Indo-European languages eventually came from such a people who were not advanced in terms of civilization. They were still at the hunter-fisher stage. Anyway, so that's the aspect of proto-Indo-European. I'll be more specific about Indo-Iranian, which is one of the branches of 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 the IE religions. The others are uh, the earliest one Anatolian, which includes Hittite, which for which documents have been found from 2000 BCE. Then Italo-Celtic, Italic languages, Celtic languages, Germanic, Balto-Slavic, Albanian, Greek, Armenian, and Tokharian. So Tokharian is the easternmost language found in the Xinjiang region of China.
Right.
So let's just now come to Indo-Iranian. Now there are a few grounding facts about Indo-Iranian which any theorist has to take into account. The first thing is that Vedic gods have been found from West Asia, which is near the Syria Iraq region. So they have documents from the Hittite empires, and the Mitanni people who interacted with the Hittites in Anatolia. They basically had Sanskrit names. The Mitanni kings had Sanskrit names, and they had horse technology which had Sanskrit sounding names, Vedic
Could
names
you also, for the superimposition to be a little easier for the viewers, could you also keep mentioning their present day names
of
of the
the region.
kingdoms? Yeah, of the regions and the kingdoms.
Yeah, so the Mitanni kingdoms was spread around Iraq, present day Iraq and Syria. Uh, and the Hittites were present in central Turkey, basically. The time period that we're talking about is 1700 to 1300 BCE, right? So we have attestation of Vedic names in West Asia, but the language was a local Hurrian, what they call a Hurrian language, which was not related to Indo-European. So only the elites and their deities, and we have Vedic deities who were mentioned in the Treaty of Friendship between the Hittites and the Mitannis. So Marut and Mitra Varun, all these gods have been mentioned. So now that puts a date as to at least 1600 BCE. Now then again there are Kassites who were in Babylon, which is again southern Iraq region of the Euphrates River. That region. They also had gods which sound like Vedic gods: Suryash, Marutash, Indra Bhaga, something like that. So even though they didn't speak an Indo-European or Sanskrit-related language, they at least had contact with the Vedic people in some manner, or
Yep.
right. So we have a time. So that is our oldest non-controversial evidence. 1700 onwards, BC onwards, there's contact between Vedic people and West Asia in some manner, which is not yet extremely clear to us. That is one. The second thing which Harvard has used in its recent paper is that the Uralic languages of Russia, of which Finnish is also a part now, has loanwords from a very early layer of Indo-Iranian. So loanwords are basically when you trade or when you have some interaction, you exchange loanwords. For example, English has left so many loanwords. We are speaking in English now, but again, English has had has given so many loanwords to Indian languages. Indian languages have also given so many loanwords to English languages, words like loot, etc.
Mm-hmm.
So they basically they are saying that Uralic languages have Indo-Iranian loanwords from early stages to middle and late stages. Now, late stages we already know that the Scythian presence in the steppe area, which is Kazakhstan, South Russia, and that region, it was there, and they were Iranian speaking people. So later loanwords are very clear because the Ural mountains and the steppe region are in contact. But so based on that, they say that because of this interaction, Indo-Iranian must have also been born in the Shantashta region of, which is also near the Ural Mountains. But the problem with this is that so this is I'll come to the problem later. So this is the second point which is raised. The third point which is raised is that Shantashta culture had some imprints of spoked wheels, and there were horses there, and so they were pastoralist people, so they match the description of Rigvedic Aryans. That is third. The fourth is that they say that there's a lot of R1A in Indians, um,
You
and
have a thought on that as well. I'll put that up
yeah, we'll talk
for
about
later.
that as well. So the fourth is that there's a lot of R1A in Indians, and the R1A is also there in some Balto-Slavic speakers from Russia and Poland and Ukraine and so on. And so that's a clear indication that the R1A came from steppe region to Indians, and that is the reason why Indians speak Indo-European language. And the final reason is apart from the Y-DNA, there's also autosomal markers which entered India around 1500 BCE. That's the claim. Uh, so, and that basically correlates with the R1A also coming down and the steppe people imposing themselves on the Indus Valley people and giving languages to all of India and so on. So the the another problem with this is that archaeologically there's actually no evidence of any contact between those steppe cultures and Indians. So this is the sixth issue. So based on these six, we have to figure out, at least with respect to Indo-Iranian, what the solution is, leaving aside the bigger problem of proto-Indo-European. So
Okay, for the
these are
audience, sorry, I just want to reiterate that the reason we jumped forward initially was because Ashish has already discussed some of these issues previously, and I will link them above. Uh, Also, Ashish, if you would touch upon the archaeological aspect, where you say that there's no interaction, but we have the Sonali findings with the chariot, we have Kalibangan with fire altars, etc.
right.
So, yeah.
So, I mean, there's nothing much to say about the archaeological aspect. There's some evidence of archaeological material culture borrowed from the Bactria Margiana complex, BMAC. From here on, I'll just refer to that as BMAC. That is present. That is a culture from around 2200 BC to 1800 BC in the Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan, current Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan region. In the Swastu Valley area, there is some contact. We have found some BMAC material, but Andronovo step material or Sintashta related material, I mean, I have not seen any proper archaeological paper in which they posit that there is any relation between those cultures which we and Indian archaeological sites. So the kurgans of the steppe cultures are known for their kurgans, which are the big dirt mounds built on their dead people, on their graves. It's absent in India. Um, Basically, I mean, I have not seen any paper. In fact, Dr. David Reich in his book says there's really no archaeological evidence to connect those two India. James Mallory in his paper says that we can trace the Antonovo people coming down till South Central Asia, but beyond that, there is like nothing to connect those cultures. So this will always remain one of the main weaknesses of the steppe theory, that you can't just change the language of the whole top of a country as large as India without any real, archaeological. You can't just do that. I mean, you have to see some. Even for example, in Hungary, Hungary has a Uralic language family,
Hmm.
and in modern Hungarians, the Uralic component in their ancestry is very low. But even then, we have samples from conquest era 700 AD CE graves in which we can clearly see that there were conquerors who had come from East Siberia, uh, and we have the DNA from that, and we can say that it was ruled by Siberians. So there were proper graves with proper connections to the eastern Uralic region, and we can now say कि अच्छा ठीक है, DNA modern Hungary में DNA की कमी है, but at least past में we have a lot of samples which show clearly that it was that the high status graves had people from the far east in Hungary, which can explain their modern languages. Apart from the case of Hungary, there's no other proper case that I've seen in which the language is not explained by a large chunk of DNA. But even in that
That's
case of
very
Hungary,
that's very interesting. I think so. Hungary functions as an exception where the archaeology proves that there essentially
the
is the
genetics
reasoning
don't
behind.
prove, yeah, the genetics don't prove that they should have another language, but the archaeology proves it. This is probably the only case of elite dominance, and it could also be the fact that they could have had a lot of Uralic ancestry in the past, but over time they just intermarried with other people and it just diluted away. So we don't have a lot of continuity in the samples. We only have, so maybe ऐसा होगा कि 20-30% रहा होगा, but over time it became 0 to 2% or something like that. We don't
If
have
you please,
all the data from all the time period. So it could
sorry,
be
if I
कि
can. Hmm.
800 CE में there would have been 30% average ancestry, external ancestry in Hungarians, जिसके हमारे पास samples हैं.
Hmm.
But ऐसा हो सकता है कि over the next 700 years they must have married outside neighbors
Okay.
who did not have this ancestry, and so this 30% over time till today it has diluted away to 2-3% only. But in any case, we have archaeological proof कि बाहर के लोग आए थे, and that's the most likely reason कि they speak Uralic languages, whereas others in that other countries don't. तो अपने इंडिया में दोनों चीजें नहीं है. इंडिया में there's no archaeological evidence at all, which is very very strange. Um, so
For the
that's
theory.
the Yeah, for the theory, that's very strange.
So I
Uh,
think initially Dr. Conrad Elst has an entire video as well. Of course, he's written books, but for those who are interested, I'm going to link his video down in the description box below, where he discusses the entire journey of how the Aryan invasion theory, now definitely not known as an invasion, reduced to a migration theory, came into being. It started apparently as a benevolent uh, linguistic comparative linguistics study and then got distorted and then politically used. But the fact that there is no basis, archaeological basis for this, and yet it has such a hold on the population is quite interesting.
there's an interesting tidbit from Dr. Reich's book, which is Who We Are and How We Got Here, in which he addresses this
Mhm.
point, and he gives an example of the Vandals and the Visigoths, who were Germanic people who sacked Rome. Uh, and there's only literary evidence of this. It has been recorded by some scribes, which has been preserved till today. But he says that so what he's trying to say is that there have been incidents in history in which there has been no archaeological evidence of anyone invading any other or sacking any other empire, but we know it happened because, example,
Literally.
this case, Visigoths and Vandals, Germanic people. But the problem is that there's no these are not two similar examples. So the Visigoths and the Vandals, their languages are extinct today, firstly. Okay. The second thing is that they probably did not even give any DNA to the Romans. Now, how is this even comparable? This seems like a very minor event in history. On the other hand, Dr. Reich is basically saying that the steppe people may probably did invade and sack the Indus Valley cities, but at the same time give a lot of DNA as well as completely change the languages of the region. Now, the two examples don't even match because the Visigoths and Vandals, they might have sacked the city, but they didn't either change the culture, the genes, or the language.
And
So
they seem to have returned because they left no genetic evidence either.
I haven't looked in detail, but Razib Khan commented on my blog post saying that there's no genetic evidence, so I'll take him at his word. And I don't think that there was any. So they don't have basically have good examples to give. That's the
Mm.
point that I was trying to make. The examples that they give don't compare. I mean, they're trying to basically compare one theory in which they basically say the biggest turning point of India was this invasion, and then they are comparing it with some minor sacking of some city which had no consequence in history.
Right.
Apart from that,
Uh,
they have no other examples to give.
Sorry, I just want to also let the audiences know that trickling down from the language theory, we also have further cultural impact that is ascribed to, attributed to the steppe invaders and then migrants and all of that. So I do also want to ask you to elaborate upon the change from the invasion to the migrants. What happened there that was based on genetic evidence?
I think they didn't find anything about any invasion, especially the archaeologists did not find any invasion. In fact, they haven't seen any proper evidence of any warfare, any dead bodies with wounds of war, any large scale dead bodies. There were some war sites apparently found from Mohenjo-daro or someplace, but it was later found out that the dead bodies were unconnected with war and they were just natural deaths. So I think, I mean, in when there's no evidence of any invasion, I think that's the primary reason why the naming has changed from Aryan invasion to Aryan migration. Um it's just semantics, I guess. Uh, but
Right.
I
Now,
mean,
with the
this is
truth,
yeah, basically this
it's
is the response given by the people who back the theory when they said, "Ki, where's the archaeological evidence?" They say, "Oh, there was no invasion; it was just a migration." That's how it is.
right now, with a truer science, we'd expect that once the evidence pointed elsewhere, we'd have a change in the conclusions as well. That has not happened in this case. I think that would bring us to some of the players in this field as the institutes that govern, that have these conversations at an academic level from which they
Yeah,
flow
okay.
down.
Okay, so I'll also continue from there with the points that I was making. I was making out the evidences that are used to find out the solution to the Indo-Iranian homeland. So the two players right now, there are multiple players, but two main players are Harvard Genetics Lab, and then there's the Max Planck labs, and then there are others like Estonia uh, Biocenter Lab, then the Indian scientists. Then there are others, some Turkish people, Turkish players, Swedish players, and so on. But the main are Harvard and Max Planck. Harvard is 100% in the camp that the steppe people of the Santashta culture came to India around 1500 BCE, and they gave a lot of ancestry and they changed the linguistic and cultural landscape of the country. That's Harvard is like 100% into this. On the other hand, Max Planck is not into this. So Paul Hegarty is from Jena University, which is in Germany, associated with Max Planck. He's a linguist. He is completely in the camp that the CHG Iran ancestry is the connecting factor for the Indo-European languages, and he believes in an Anatolian homeland theory, and that the Indo-Iranian language is completely restricted to West Asia. It has nothing to do with steppe. And even Johannes Cross, who is the genetics guy at Max Planck, he has his book. In that, he is also very clear that he is also open to a cross trans-Iranian Plato movement of Indo-European language into India. So this is not mainstream. Only Harvard has the consensus that the steppe people are responsible for the Indian languages. That's not the mainstream theory. Although they are quoted a lot, but there are other scholars who do not believe in that theory.
Unfortunately, they're quoted most in India, not really quoted from an academic perspective. Like I said, a lot of the academic conversations have bled down into popular uh, conversations. This is also due to our school books propagating this theory. I think to this day, this is taught in schools.
Maybe I don't. Yeah, I don't remember my school books. Yeah, but maybe they're there. Yeah, so they are quoted a lot. That's true. Because I mean, they just start with the assumption that their theory is true. I mean, they don't think twice about that at all. Harvard is like that, and it's actually extremely irritating to watch. So in the recent, so let's continue from that 6.6 from those 6 points that I had given. Now the first problem is that there's no archaeological proof.
Sorry, if I could ask you to repeat those points, I'll just, in that same order, I'll just share it for the
Right. So
audience
for
again.
Indo-Iranian, these are the points to consider to figure out a solution for the homeland of Indo-Iranian only.
Mm,
First is the 1700 BCE presence of Vedic gods in the texts that we have found from Syria, Iraq, and those regions. That is one. So that's the hardest evidence that we have because those are
mm.
written and dated documents. The second is,
Non-controversial.
yeah, not controversial at all, and that evidence was the evidence which everyone used ground their claims कि जो भी हो ये तो satisfy होना चाहिए.
Mm,
The second is presence of Indo-Iranian loanwords in Uralic languages. Uh, that is point number two. Point number three is presence of R1A in modern Indians. Point number four is presence of steppe ancestry, autosomal ancestry in modern Indians. So these two are why
mm,
R1A and steppe autosomal ancestry is connected but thoda separate because they are different parts of the chromosome. And
mm.
the fifth part was 1500 BC steppe ancestry in Indians. ये हो गया. And sixth part was archaeology, basically. So it has to archaeologically they have to connect. We have to connect all these movements. So based on these evidences, basically everyone's trying to figure out the Indo-Iranian homeland. Now the problem with, as I said, was that there is no archaeological connect between Indian Bronze Age or Iron Age cultures, Bronze
Mm,
Age culture especially, and steppe. And the
mm,
second problem is that there's no presence of Sintashta-related steppe ancestry anywhere in West Asia. We recently got samples from Western Iran, so from sites of Hasanlu and Dinkha Tepe in Western Iran. So on those sites, which is the hardest evidence that we have, that there needs to be some contact with those people of Syria, Iraq, and West Asia.
mhm.
Uh, there's no steppe ancestry from Sintashta there. There's a steppe ancestry from other places like Yamnaya, from north of the Caucasus mountains, but that has no relation, according to any theory, to Indo-Iranian. So these two problems always plague. Now there are problems with all the points, which I have discussed in my blog post as well. So, for example, the problem with R1A, uh, I think 2-3 posts back on my blog, there's a post called R1A Explained.
Yes, I will bring that up.
Yeah. So so while it's true that R1A, so there's a lot of technicality with. I mean, R1A is just not. It's just not one. There are lots of subclades within R1A as well.
Mm,
So there are basically two subclades which are present in India. One of that is called R1A L657, and the other is R1A Z2124. Now, this R1A Z2124 is definitely from steppe because it's found in almost all of the Sintashta related samples. Now, R1A L657, which is basically a brother of cousin of these Z2124 guys,
mm.
it's present. It's if you go down, uh, its presence in it's only present in India and South Asia. It's not present in any of the ancient samples of steppe from
Okay.
3015 to 200 BCE. It's not present at all. Neither is it
Exactly.
present in any appreciable quantities in modern people of the steppe region, like
Mm,
Kyrgyzstan, Kazakhstan, and so on. So
mhm,
the problem is that it's not from there because we can't find it there. Neither in some 200, 300 ancient male samples, it's not there.
mm,
And neither is it there in modern people of that region.
mm,
The whereas in modern Indians, it makes up around 70% of the R1A, and only around 20, only around 20-30% of the Indian R1A is the step kind, which is
Mm-hmm.
Z2124. R1A Z2124. R1A, the older, the parent clades of R1A are found in Russia in very early samples,
Yeah.
and so its probable origin is that region itself. It's not in India. uh, Z2124, which is the cousin of what is most frequent in India, is also found in Syntashta culture. But the one which is most uh, frequent in modern Indians is not from that region because we can't find it there. So now there might be, now we can think कि ऐसा कैसे हो सकता है कि अगर वहाँ पे अगर R1 है रशिया से ही है
Mm.
और मगर L657 वहाँ पे मिल नहीं रहा तो व्हाट हाउ कैन इट बी कि इंडिया में इतना फैल गया है अगर वो ओरिजिनली वहाँ से ही है तो देयर कैन बी वेरियस एक्सप्लेनेशंस वन एक्सप्लेनेशन इज which I don't favor is कि there were lots of L657 people there. They all invaded India and they no L657 was left behind who fathered a child. So we don't find them in the ancient DNA record also, and we don't find them in moderns also because 100% of the L657 they came to India. Now
Mm.
this is something which is hard to buy because वहाँ पे उस टाइम पे DNA टेस्ट तो होते नहीं थे ना उनको मतलब उनको नहीं पता ना कि वो कुछ there are uh, some descendants though would have been left behind, right? And they have fathered more children there. We would have found in ancient DNA in some sample somewhere, or at least in modern times there would have been descendants of these people. But
Mm.
that's not to be found. So the idea is that there probably would have been ancestors of L657 who came from steppe in very small numbers, and one of them became reproductively successful in India after 2500 BCE. Now, the birth date of this L657 is also 2200 BCE, like 700 years before the alleged invasion.
Mm-hmm.
So, the birth of this is actually uh, before any invasion, and in India itself. And from one man, now we have 25 percent of Indians with who are descendants of that L657 man. So essentially, what I'm trying to say is there probably was never any invasion of these R1A men. It, the ones that we
Yeah.
have today are probably just descendants of one man who was here from in some. Matlab, he would have been a traveler. I don't know how he came to India.
Mm. Mm.
For what reason, also I can't say. But some there would have been some connect. He would have come here and he reproductively became successful and is part of and he is fathered grandfathered 25% of modern Indian men basically. Now the Z2124, which is definitely related to the steppe people, it's only there in about 5% or so, and that too it's higher in northwest India. तो उसका
Mm.
impact East India, Central India वगैरह पे है ही नहीं ज़्यादा. So the step related R1A Z2124 is not present in any large numbers.
Mm.
So this is basically R1A argument is weak because uh, the
Plus, it
steps
came
specific.
in later, right? This was found in later samples. It's not from. Sorry, it was found in earlier samples, not 1500 BCE, right?
Which ones? Which one are you talking about?
The Z2124.
These are found in almost all the Syntashta samples from 2000 BC.
Okay.
So all of the Syntashta people are descendants of this Z2124.
Right. Okay. So, but this it's still a little earlier than the theory states, right?
So the theory states that these 2000 BC Syntashta people who had all these Z2124, they invaded India through their descendants around 1500 BCE or so,
1500 BCE.
and
Yes.
destroyed Indus Valley or whatever, or migrated there, whatever, and changed all the languages and fathered all these R1A children. But the problem is that R1A in India is not descended from Z2124. Only 5-7% are descended from Z2124. The rest are not descendants of Z2124, but rather of the uncle of 2124, which is not found anywhere in STEM. you know. So
Yeah.
so they so that's the major reason why the R1A analogy is wrong. And the problem with Harvard, where, I don't know if this was. It's hard to deny. I mean, they are smart people. It's hard to deny that they would leave out nuance like this and just claim that all our Indian R1A is from the stem. It's hard to deny. They are smart people, right? So it's, I don't know why that is, because they take a lot of pains to make the nuances clear in other regions, but somehow when it comes to India, they forget all the nuances.
Right.
So that now that this is the so the West Asia evidence does not line up, and I have written a long post on that, which is regarding. I think the title is "The Southern Arc Paper Debunks the Step Theory in Multiple Ways."
Yes. Right.
So that is that basically there's no connection between the Santashta culture and West Asia. The actual contact with that region was from the Bactria region. So we actually have samples with a lot of Bactrian BMAC ancestry in West Asia at around the time that we expect them to be there. So the BMAC people most likely were the carriers of the Iranian languages to West Iran. Um, so the history of that region is by 1000 BCE, the northwest region of Iran was Iranized basically. Earlier, it was they spoke probably some Assyrian-related languages, some Semitic languages or Hurrian or something like that, and
Mm.
it was only Iranized. The consensus is 1000 BC. Now the problem is, that we have samples from there. Until 1000 BC, there's no Sintashta-related ancestry at all there. But what we do find is there is BMAC related ancestry and also some IVC related samples, a couple of them, not a lot.
Mm.
So if the alternative to step theory is, which is my theory, is that BMAC and IVC regions were already Indo-European speaking since 2000 BC, long before 2000 BC. So in that case, it makes a lot of sense that BMAC people basically uh, gave a lot of ancestry to West Iran, and that region started speaking Iranian languages. And in my post, I've given a lot of other archaeological details and other linguistic details, which makes the connection stronger. So we talked about West Asia, we talked about R1A. Now this 1500 BC
No, I'm not.
invasion of steppe people into India, even that is a very tentative date. I think in my latest post, I have tried to figure out which is the exact steppe source into Indians.
Mm.
And my conclusion is that it's probably something related to Turkmenistan Iron Age sample of 850 BCE. So a much later sample. And in that post again, I have basically criticized Harvard for making a lot out of very limited data and making conclusions which they should not have. I also say that that Narasimhan 2019 paper has basically set back Indian genetics by maybe a decade. So I basically debunk a lot of their conclusions.
Can you explain why that was one of the conclusions?
So if you go to my latest post,
Okay, the latest post. Let me.
if you go to my latest post, just go to the end, just before conclusions. There are a lot of basically they don't have enough data from India, and based on the limited data they have, they made a lot of big claims which favored their theory. That's it. They don't
Okay.
so figure out exactly when the steppe ancestry entered Haryana. We need Haryana samples, right?
Yeah.
We need samples from Haryana from say 2000 BCE, 1500 BC, 1000 BC, and 500 BCE. Even
Mm.
if we just have one sample from each of these four periods, and we can
Mm.
figure out how the ancestry changed over 500 over each of those 500 years. But they don't have any of that.
Mm.
Yeah. Just about conclusions.
Yeah.
Yeah, these 4 points.
Let's go through them.
So what I found is that the Turkmenistan BC. So I analyzed basically 11 populations from India.
Right.
Five of them were private samples which had been sent to me,
Mm.
and the others were already available in the ancient DNA database.
Okay.
So I find that I gave a lot of options to the tools. QPADM, QPADMX is the tool. It can basically select the best source among many sources. So I gave them options for 5 step sources which have high step ancestry, and Sintashta was there. Other some two others were there, and some Iron Age and post Iron Age were there. For example, Turkmenistan IA was there, and Kangju samples were there, which are 200 CE, 200 AD sample culture, Eastern Iranian speaking culture. So what I found was all these 11, they basically choose Turkmenistan Iron Age as the source, which is a 850 BC sample. And it's a 50-50 sort of mix between steppe and BMAC,
Hmm.
and definitely Iranian speaking. So an Iranian speaking source cannot
Opposite of
be.
it, yeah. Like this is like the exact opposite of your conclusion. Like it's an absolutely wrong conclusion. What would cause them to come to this conclusion?
Yeah, so you can read it here. These are the 4 things that they messed up.
No, I know,
Uh,
but what would cause them to draw such a conclusion? Like,
because
I'm
they have a
sorry.
bias, because they have a bias, and they just wanted to, they
So
can't think of it. They cannot picture it and fathom it happening any other way. They cannot picture it in their head. They can't fathom it any other way other than step warriors on their chariots sacking Indus Valley and giving languages to the region.
this depends on genetic evidence. You've
No,
passed several
so if
tools
you,
that you have access to. You've put in several options and then come to this conclusion. I'm guessing the methodology is pretty similar. Anyway, all
no, no,
right.
I'll tell you how it happens. See, these are very small, minute differences between what I'm saying and what they are saying. These are actually not big differences. So I basically am agreeing that there's step ancestry which came into India. They are also saying there's step ancestry which came into India.
Through the through is the
ठीक
point.
ठीक है. Now the question is how and when.
How, मतलब
Now,
कहाँ से
how and
आती
when. So how and when may we differ?
है?
Now they base. So if you come to the fourth point, they even Narsimhan finds that Kangju ancestry is a viable ancestry for Indians. No,
Okay.
sorry, third point. Third point.
So this is
If you read the Narsimhan paper fine print in the supplement, their models with Kangju as a step source works. I've quoted it. From Narsimhan supplement, we were unable to reject a single. You can read it.
hmm.
नीचे उसके नीचे.
Hmm.
We were unable to reject a single source.
Right, right.
So they had it. One of the Kangju, they did not test Turkmenistan IA. That was not a choice of source.
That's
I
that
can.
that was my question actually. Ki how would they derive it? Because you put in some options and they would have the same options on hand. So they do not test that option. Okay, got it.
Yeah, but I can't fault them for that. They tested many others, but
Got
ये
it.
वाला नहीं था. ठीक है, चलो होता है. और वैसे भी Turkmenistan IA is just INH is just one sample.
Hmm.
तो they found only one sample from that region. ऐसा नहीं था कि कुछ 5 6 7 सैंपल मिले हैं. I can I can it's okay. ठीक है, उन्होंने उसको टेस्ट नहीं किया, बट कांगजू तो हो गया ना पास. कांगजू is very similar to Turkmenistan IA. Only it has some extra 5-10% East Asian ancestry.
Hmm. ठीक है.
ठीक है. तो now but they still rejected it because of some very shady reasons. Now that is the problem. The shady reasons used to reject कि कांगजू क्यों नहीं होता है, and they should have thought कि भाई कांगजू क्यों सिलेक्ट हो रहा है. अगर
Right.
पास हुआ है उनके मॉडल में तो क्यों क्यों हुआ है. So they did not think about that. So they rejected it because of some very lame reasons. Ki there is East Asian ancestry in the steppe region after 1000 BCE, and Indians don't require East Asian ancestry, so we reject. मतलब काफी shady reason उन्होंने दिया है, क्योंकि ईस्ट एशियन एंसेस्ट्री इंडियंस को नहीं चाहिए, तो कांगजू क्यों पास हो रहा है.
ये क्या reason है?
No,
Anyway, the entire thing is based on a lot of tautological assumptions. So,
yeah, it's very weak. My point is that the reasons that they give for denying a later step entry into India is very weak, and they don't have the data to back it up. And I have found key it's like 95% probability that they are wrong. That the late step entry of Shaka-like people into India, the Scythians, is much more likely. Because the models also tell me so, and because the archaeological evidence also matches what my model says. Those all those that archaeological evidence also I've given in this post. So that is the reason. So 1500 BC भूल जाओ क्योंकि archaeological evidence भी नहीं है और उनका जो models है it's not based on it's based on very weak logic. मतलब just because step ancestry आया है does not mean कि it caused a lot of upheaval and change in culture and everything. We have to understand. We need more data to understand कि क्यों हुआ and what were the changes that were caused due to it.
Right.
They can't just say कि इतना बड़ा मतलब इतना बड़ा based on some few samples they should not conclude these things.
That's a huge conclusion. All right, let's just quickly go through point 2 as well.
Yeah, that's just flat out wrong. I mean, that's just flat out wrong. मैं क्या बोलूँ मतलब in this post itself there are Rajput samples who have same or higher step ancestry than Brahmin groups.
Yeah.
We know for a fact that Northwest Indians, like some Jats, have much higher step ancestry than Brahmin groups. तो कुछ बोलने लायक है नहीं.
So this is the part. Look, I'm not a very technical person on this in this aspect, right? So this is the part that I find really funny, because when it's academic, it's the Brahmins who have high, Arvani ancestry, step ancestry. But when it's popular culture, it's the Jats and these, who find commonality with Pakistanis and then have that sort of supremacy. So this is very weird that the academic situation is wrong, whereas the pop culture part is currently understood as correct. So
Yeah, this may cause a lot of issues in the pop culture and society as such. But
it
me
does.
personally, I'm not heavily invested in any of those. I'm just looking at the data.
Yeah, no, I'm just saying that they are correct in this sense. Apart from the supremacy, it's just that they seem that the popularization of this sort of discourse has led to this sort of commonality, common ground finding for the Northwestern Rajputs, Jats, etc. Whereas the Brahmins have lesser of the steppe ancestry.
It's not less. It depends in the region. For example, in UP, in this post, I've analyzed one Dvivedi sample and two Rajputs and Telugu Brahmins, then another Niyogi Telugu Brahmin.
Through that.
So the UP in UP, the Brahmins and Rajputs have similar ancestry.
Of course,
The scheduled caste has a lower step ancestry. But in South, I found that there's one Niyogi sample. Someone provided me their personal sample to analyze, and they have that Niyogi Brahman fellow has a very low step ancestry, maybe around 5 to 7%. That's it. Mostly, he just models like an average Gujarati. So in the South, the step ancestry is low, but this fellow had even lower than average. So in the sense कि ऐसा नहीं है कि ब्राह्मण्स में कुछ disproportionately step ancestry related है. साउथ में जरूर है, साउथ में रिलेशन है, because the Brahmins in the south are ultimately from the north itself.
Of course,
But
I think that's also got literature. There's evidence in literature for that. That's not really contested so much.
That's their story as well, right? They came from the north. I mean, Aryavarta the north में ही था, so they would have had to come to the north, from the north. But west, east और north India में there's not step सब में ही है. गुजरात में थोड़ा कम है, but especially हरियाणा, यूपी वगैरह में और सेंट्रल इंडिया में देखोगे, ब्राह्मण्स में ऐसा नहीं है. राजपूत ब्राह्मण वगैरह में सब सिमिलर ही है. My theory is that there was during the Scythian rule, so there was 1,000 years of contact with the Shak clans of northwest India and beyond. So 1000 BC onwards till 200-300 CE till the Indo-Shak kings, Kanishka II and his descendants. इतने टाइम में कंटिन्यूस शार्क कांटेक्ट और रूल रहा है, including Indo-Greeks बीच में आए, Alexander came in the middle also, then the Achaemenid Empire of Persia, they ruled India for some time. There was a lot of chance for a lot of contact, and elites of the society could also have intermingled rather than some invasion scenario. So they really need a lot more data to make claims. A simple invasion, they ran and sacked everything वगैरह, मतलब it might sound good to them, but grand theory के लिए ठीक है, but when it comes to the details and the minute aspects of it, it does not like really pan out.
Right. As for the politicization of them coming from the north to the south, there is also one is the variation. Of course, it was not just a. There's a variation across the ages in the percentage of step ancestry in the Brahmins as well. But also,
Yeah.
the fact is that internal migrations, domestic migrations, are extremely common across history, across countries. So the politicization is absolutely political in nature. It's not scientific and has no basis. Also, there are kings across the country have always provided patronage to certain priests and certain cultures depending on their leanings, and as such, they have invited the people to settle there, and this is from the west to the east as well. So there's a religious evidence and linguistic evidence to all of these happening. So anyway, let's also
So
go.
let me just add there. For example, this the Sangam Tamil poems and literature. I think the date is around 200 BCE or 100 BC or something like that. They explicitly mention that the Velirs, which are believed to be the modern Tamil Vellalar people, which is a dominant caste of that region today. They are basically descendants of Lord Krishna from Dwarka. So they are Yaduvanshis, and it's noted in the texts that they came from Gujarat.
Mm,
Uh, and there are Brahmi inscriptions also found from Tamil sites in which the king has a Yadu name.
right.
So this process is probably responsible. This migration from maybe Dwarka or Gujarat basically might also be responsible for the Sanskritization of the southern languages and the introduction of Hindu and Vedic religion in the south of India, possibly.
Right. Uh, there were also at the later times there were also uh, some migrations due to invasions as well. So
And let me also add one another important aspect in that from that Sangam poem.
uh-huh.
They also say that they are some 49 generation from Lord Krishna from Dwarka. So if you use that information,
You can
is it 49 or something else? Basically, I had calculated before, it comes to something somewhere around 1200 BCE or so. That 200 BCE minus those generations that they have mentioned in the Sangam texts. So they basically say that Lord Krishna would have been around some 1200 1300 BCE. It depends on the numbers that you use for generation
go.
per generation. But yeah, so we also have to explain how the Sanskritization of the south happened. A few Brahmins, 1% Brahmins coming from the north, does not really explain the large number of Sanskrit words in the southern languages. It has to be accompanied by a lot uh, of Indo-European speakers from North India or West India or whatever it is, who over time became Dravidian speakers,
Mm,
but still, got a lot of northern Sanskrit-derived vocabulary into the southern languages.
got it. All right. Yeah. So let's go through the third conclusion.
Yeah, one of the reasons that Narasimhan in his 2019 paper, when I say Narasimhan, I mean all the authors of that paper. He was the lead author,
Yeah.
but all the authors of the paper are responsible for that paper. So they say that East Asian related admixture is seen in the steppe region, which is hardly present in India, which suggests that the steppe ancestry is in India is derived from pre-Iron Age Central Asians. By pre-Iron Age, broadly they mean pre-1000 BCE.
Hmm.
Uh, the point is that this is actually not true. I mean, East Asian ancestry is there in the northern parts of the steppe, but in the southern parts, which is Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, uh, we have, there are more recent papers which have samples from those regions, which they have very minimal East Asian ancestry.
Hmm.
So what here where they messed up was that uh, th- that they did not sample all the regions and all the populations. There were definitely populations present which are more closer to India, which did not have the East Asian ancestry, and you would expect that, right? Because the regions which are more closer to India are farther away from that source of the East Asian ancestry. They are more in the north and the east, which even more north of China, for example.
Right.
So the source of that East Asian ancestry is somewhere in far east of Russia. So eventually it trickled down post 1200, 1300
Hmm.
BCE, but it did not reach all the way down to South Turkmenistan, right? Uh, Kyrgyzstan, which is more to the north of Turkmenistan, it might have had some additional East Asian ancestry. The point is that it did not percolate all the populations of that region.
Hmm.
And Narasimhan, in that paper they make a sweeping conclusion, but they don't have all the facts on hand. And later papers basically do say that there were groups which did not have enough East Asian ancestry. Plus, they themselves also find that Kangju is a good source. Now, Kangju itself has some 10% East Asian ancestry.
Sure. Hmm.
So, 5-10% of Indian populations can still handle it in terms of their models,
Hmm.
but not 20-25%. You know, so 0 to 10% is acceptable for Indians, East Asian ancestry. So itna, so there are basically that point is not sound. It's very weak. We have other samples from later periods which fit very well as a source for Indians, and those have very little East Asian ancestry. Yeah, so basically the point about them restricting the steppe ancestry in India before 1000 BCE is not based on any sound reasoning. It's based on flimsy and a small data set of that time, which I think has been superseded by later papers.
Okay.
And I think what is now left is that is that point number two, Indo-Iranian loanwords in Uralic languages,
Right. Okay.
which is not. I don't think I have written about it because there's
No.
not much to write. So
I
in the
think
southern,
archaeological evidence भी डिस्कस करते हैं.
archaeological evidence I think we discussed, right? कि कुछ है ही नहीं.
Okay. कुछ जो है
We
वो
can discuss which can discuss Sanoli वगैरह. We can
exactly.
discuss
वही
Sonali
वही.
findings which have nothing to do with step
हाँ,
or anything.
वो बहुत
So,
पुराना है so.
so Indo-Iranian loanwords in Uralic. Firstly, this is undateable evidence. So there are loanwords. For example, Arya is or Orya there in Proto-Uralic. Orja. J is pronounced year, but the meaning there is slave. Ulta hai. Something like that. So based on a few words like this, they have compiled it and they have said ki Indo-Iranian must be very close to the Uralic homeland because otherwise how could there have been exchanges between these two?
Probably.
Well, the first thing is that the dating and timing of these are not, this is not dated evidence.
Hmm.
Okay, this is based on, they have reconstructed some proto-Uralic words from modern languages, or the first inscriptions or literature that they found in those Uralic languages, Finnish and all these languages.
Hmm.
It can't be dated. What they what they try to say is that the form of the word in which was borrowed is ancient and is not like modern Indo-Iranian. So they try to say that the form in which it was borrowed is quite old. But this is not some sturdy evidence like we have from the Mitanni region, in which we have literal words written on text which can be dated.
Right.
Secondly, this is not the solution is not only ki Uralic homeland and Indo-Iranian homelands must be next to each other for to explain this matter. The problem is that there are no Uralic loanwords in Indo-Iranian.
Yes, it's only one way. I remember.
So, yeah, so if there were two cultures side by side and only one culture giving loanwords to the other because of some interaction, you should have expected at least some loanwords to go into this, right?
Absolutely.
And then from step it would have come to Indians and Iranians, and there would have been some loanwords of Uralic origin in Indian languages, but there are
Hmm.
absolutely zero which are agreed upon. And ek do, matlab, there might have been some papers in which they suggest one or two, but nothing is accepted by people.
Hmm.
So there are problems with the theory. Firstly, it's not dated evidence, which is not hard evidence. You can't use it to restrict a homeland from the step. In the Southern Arc paper, if you read Lazaridis' 2022 Southern Arc paper, in which there are the samples from Hassanlu in Western Iran, they basically use this argument to say that this is the only possible place where Indo-Iranian could be from. And they completely forget and omit the earlier accepted benchmark, which was 1700 Mitan. उसको भूल गए,
Ha ha
which
ha
is the
ha.
actual hard dated evidence.
Right.
वो कहीं मेंशन ही नहीं है. तो उन्होंने कंप्लीट गोल को शिफ्ट कर दिया है कि क्योंकि यूरलिक में अनडेटेड एविडेंस है, लोन वर्ड्स वगैरह बहुत पुराने हैं, देयर आर ओल्ड लोन वर्ड्स इन यूरलिक,
Ah.
सो इंडो एरियन होमलैंड उधर ही होना चाहिए. वही देयर आर मल्टीपल वेज इन विच दैट कुड हैव हैपेंड, इवन इफ इट्स ट्रू एंड इवन इफ योर डेट्स आर करेक्ट. फॉर एग्जांपल, because there's only one way of borrowing, it does not basically tells us ki the origin of those loanwords is more southern, from the BMAC region, probably from Turkmenistan, Uzbekistan region, rather than from North Kazakhstan. And there were
No.
people who were traveling there, taking their technologies and some loanwords to those people.
Hmm.
That is one possible solution. And genetically, there is a good reason to suggest that there was contact from South Central Asia to North Kazakhstan, at least post 2000, post 2500 BCE. After all, agriculture, the cereals and grains came from South Central Asia to those regions. Sintashta didn't even know of agriculture; they didn't practice agriculture.
Yes.
So, I mean, there are multiple ways, and such non-sturdy evidence cannot be used to just constrict a homeland just because it suits their theories. That
True.
too, after ditching the earlier benchmark, which was 1700 present BCE presence of Vedic loanwords in West Asia. So that is what I'll say about. So they are essentially using very flimsy evidence. I mean, they don't have too much going on for them. More data, when more data comes, I'm pretty sure that the findings of Narasimhan will be overturned. And especially it will tell us कि 1000 BCE के बाद step ancestry इंडिया में आई है. अगर वैसा प्रूव हो जाता है तो then their whole case falls apart,
Hmm.
because 1000 BC, post
Language
1000 BC,
since a long time.
then people cannot bring Vedic language to India. There is no chance. They must be Iranian or something.
For those interested in this a little more, the easiest place to sort of understand is also David Frawley's, Dr. Frawley's. It's called Frawley's paradox, I think. So you can read up about that and then move on to Conrad Eltz, because genetics is a much later means of evidence finding in this theory, because first it was linguistic and comparative linguistics eventually overturned the Aryan migration theory and I think Shrikant Alagari's work in this aspect, well, he shows how the words for flora and fauna go from the east to the west across the Rig Veda. And then, of course, Dr. Elst's work is also quite, makes that same point. Dr. Frawley's observation is summarized in his paradox. And then the archaeological evidence was cited because it was the lack of evidence, now absence of evidence, does not indicate evidence of absence. That's sort of an accepted scientific axiom, but in this case, that was not applied. And now that absent evidence is also located, The genetics aspect was pushed, like Ashish mentioned, the Harvard scientists have often favored one theory, and as such, genetics was also brought into play, and that is also sort of being questioned right now. Um, because that is not adding up to that kind of conclusion. Ashish, on with the Sonali samples, there's a lot of expectation from them. Even when the Rakhigarhi samples were analyzed, there was a lot of talk about that completely overturning the Aryan migration theory, which technically it has done, but it's not accepted still. What do
Which
we
one?
expect?
No,
Rakhi
Rakhi Gadi did not have. I mean, there was no scope for it to.
but the thing is, it's from a long time ago. It's from before the step ancestry was determined to come in the country, but it's still considered Vedic culture, right? That's the evidence that it was considered Vedic culture, and as such, did not have step ancestry. There was no sign of
Right,
this.
right.
So
But it did not. It did not provide evidence. But it provided evidence in support of the people. Also provided evidence in support of the people who were saying that step ancestry came in later. Because step
yeah,
ancestry was not present in Rakhigadi 2000 BCE, but it's present in modern Indians. So what it tells us
is
is
that
that
the timeline
2000.
might match, but the step people did not bring Vedic culture. That's what's the
Right,
argument. Uh,
right, yeah, okay, you could say that, yeah.
yeah.
If
So
if 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 Rakhigadi is believed to be Vedic culture and it didn't have steppe ancestry, then you could say okay, steppe ancestry has nothing to do with Vedic culture.
right. Same thing with Sonali is expected, is it?
Sonali DNA result is supposed to be probably going to be very similar to Rakhigadi. There won't be steppe DNA there.
Right. But that's definitely determined to be a Vedic culture. Sonali
It's
did.
it's got yeah. I mean, I believe it to be related to the Vedic culture, simply because it's in the heart of the Kuru kingdom, of Mahabharata, and it shows warriors with their weapons, with helmet, with shield, with the sword, with bow and arrow. Uh,
Chariots.
and their another weapon, which is the chariot, which is the rath.
Mm.
सो आई मीन और क्या चाहिए मतलब तुमको कुरु हार्टलैंड में ये सब मिल गया तो यही है ना और क्या है अब
So,
नाउ नेसियर्स विल से कि यार उसका कि द व्हील्स वेर सॉलिड व्हील्स देयर वर नो स्पोक्स देयर
हाँ, ये spokes नहीं थे, यही
तो
बोला
ये
है.
सब तो मतलब दिस इज व्हाट वी कॉल कोप सो दिस इज ऑल कोप बेसिकली यू आर मिसिंग द फॉरेस्ट कंप्लीटली
Right. Uh, so for those interested,
I would just like to say that regardless of what animals were used to pull those vehicles,
mm,
the fact even if bulls were used to pull them, so bull pulled ratha is mentioned in the Rig Veda in the race of Mudgala and Mudgalini.
right,
So actually, in fact, the only human race which is not sort of mystical or mythological uh, is that race in which bulls were pulling the
mm,
racing vehicle, and it is also known as ratha. So I don't care what Indologists say कि spoke नहीं है तो it can't be a chariot. I mean, Rigveda says it's a bull pulled vehicle is a chariot, तो खत्म हो गया बात.
mm,
Plus warrior culture hai, there's chariots, there's weapons, it's in the heart, it's in the proper place. So I think the best bet is this OCP culture of Sonali. I think it's a very good bet for a Vedic side,
exactly.
for
So
Vedic
OCP
culture.
stands for ochre-colored pottery, and I think it was one of the points that helped Dr. B.V. Lal switch from the from functioning along AMT lines to propagating the non-AMT argument, AIMT arguments, which is the Aryan Invasion-Migration/migration theory. For those interested, Discovery Plus has a very simplified walkthrough featuring Dr. Neeraj Rai, Dr. Vasant Shinde, who was the genetic analysts as well as the archaeologists, respectively, of the Sonali dates. It's narrated by the narration is by Manoj Bajpayee in Hindi. It also shows you the warrior clans had martial men and women, everybody, even children, everybody was trained in the martial arts, and they were all warriors buried with their weapons. It is from the culture that buries its elders, and it's a very simplified documentary and very interestingly made. The 3D modeling of the weaponry of the graves is very well done, so you might want to check it out. So that actually sort of concludes the archaeological evidence aspect of it as well. Um, all right. Is there anything else that that you think makes an impact along these six
Yeah,
points?
I would like to add key. Let me just get back to proto-Indo-European. I was most of what I said today was mostly about Indo-Iranians, but let me talk about Proto-Indo-Europeans. So this latest paper by Harvard, which was lead authored by Lazaridis, uh,
Mm,
which is the Southern Arc paper. So they are basically conclude that there's no steppe ancestry in Anatolia. They have looked at Anatolian samples from 8000 BCE to 1000 BCE, and the Hittites are definitely supposed to be there, which Hittite is a Indo-European language, definitely supposed to be there from 2500 to 2000 BCE onwards.
mm,
But even there, they haven't found steppe DNA. So, so the absence of steppe DNA, but the lot of presence of Caucasian slash Iranian ancestry there makes them believe that the Armenia Iran region is the origin of the Proto Indo Europeans. So the steppe homeland of Proto Indo Europeans has already it had problems, but now even Harvard is shifting towards uh, Armenia slash Iran as the Proto Indo European homeland. From there, they say that it the ancestry went north to the steppe region, and from there it spread all over Western Europe. But then they also believe that via to the east via Santashta culture, it came south into India and gave uh, languages to India, which I believe, as we have talked about, I don't believe is supported by evidence.
right. You
So
what?
this is the latest uh, in this field of Proto-Indo-European, and this is important because now the original component of the Proto-Indo-Europeans has shifted from the steppe component or the pre-steppe component, which is the Eastern European hunter-gatherers, to the Caucasian and Iranian uh, Neolithic people, farmers. Now India has even Rakhigadi has 50-60% of ancestry related to these Iranian and Caucasian hunter-gatherers or farmers. So the route of language dispersal through this route, this path, which has nothing to do with Europe or steppe,
Nice.
so is still open. They had made an attempt to close that route when they said that there's no Anatolian ancestry in India. But as I've said, that's not true as well.
Mm,
So the alternate paths for Indo-European languages in India, apart from the step theory, still remain open, and I believe that any other theory apart from step theory actually. I have four theories, all of which are more probable according to me than the step theory.
okay. Would you list them?
So one is that India was
That
the
would be
homeland.
okay.
One theory is that India was the homeland of all the Indo-European languages, and from there it
That's
spread
yeah,
out.
from the theory.
Out of India theory, I believe कि इसके लिए evidence अभी इतना है नहीं.
इतना नहीं है
Genetic
हाँ.
genetic evidence is not there. The second theory is that South and Central Asia was. I have three theories actually. I'll just list three. So second is South Central Asia is the origin of all these languages, and it gave ancestry to India along with Indian languages, and then it spread west and into the steppe. This is the second theory. The third theory is the Armenian theory, which is now probably mainstream. This has good things going on for it. So this would entail कि Armenia say first there was an, towards Anatolia there was a ancestry flow towards the west. Then there was an ancestry flow to the north into the steppe, and from the steppe into all of Western Europe, and then the third one to the east into India. So these are the three theories right now, which I favor. The third theory, for a long time, I supported the second theory, but the third theory, given current data, also seems to have its merits. But in any of these scenarios, the main point is which I need to satisfy for my own, according to my own study, is that Indo-Iranian languages in India would be present for a much longer time than what is otherwise proposed by the step theory. So at least 3000, 4000 BC onwards, India may those languages would have been there. From
Uh,
wherever, even if they came from outside,
mm,
they should
mm,
have been in that region since quite some time.
right. This is the paradox also, right? That we have a silent culture and we have a huge volume of text, so they possibly overlap, which means that was the language of the Vedic digs. Um, all right. Can you just explain this quandary because it sounds very exciting, and I'll let you go after this.
Which one? Key the geography and the language. Wala.
Yes. No, no.
Yeah, yeah. I mean the language of.
And R1B.
Sorry, what R1?
The on the screen. The rules,
Oh,
but
okay,
they
just one minute.
can't see.
Okay, so this is about the broad conclusion based on a generalization, right? Ki Indians have R1A, and R1A is there in Balto Slavic speakers also, and it was a major component of the steppe Bronze Age populations. So that proves that steppe people brought languages to India. This has been their major claim throughout. Now the problem here is that in the Hasanlu samples
Hmm.
uh, of northwestern Iran between 1500 and 800 BCE, they found a lot of R1B samples. So R1B is the marker for the Yamnaya related culture.
Hmm.
Yamnaya is north of Caucasus, uh, 3000 BCE culture. But then they say that, but there are other reasons to believe that these samples from Masandu are not Indo-European or Indo-Iranian speakers. ठीक है?
Okay.
So even though they have R1B, they say कि वो Indo-European speakers नहीं हो सकते. Now this is different from what they use for India, right?
Sure.
They say कि India में R1A and R1B are both Indo-European related
Right.
by haplogroup markers.
Huh.
राइट सो R1B है सो अकॉर्डिंग टू देयर लॉजिक R1B जैसे ही प्रेजेंट हो गया वैसे इंडो यूरोपियन बोलना चालू हो गया राइट
Right.
दैट्स
Huh.
द लॉजिक दैट दे
Huh.
but then they gave a lot of reasons as to why that is not true for this. So I'm saying those same ki there are a lot of other reasons also why it's not. There are a lot of reasons why it may not be true for India as well.
True for
They don't
India as
use
well. Right. Got it.
plus there
All
are a
right.
lot of examples. For example, Latvia and Lithuania are Baltic language speaking countries. So that's an Indo-European language.
Yes.
But they have 30, 25, 30, 35% Y haplogroup N frequency in their males. Now, Y haplogroup N is a strong marker of Uralic languages. So the Y, but they don't speak Uralic languages, right? On the other hand, Estonia uh, is Estonian is an Uralic language, but they also
Hmm.
have 35% haplogroup N. So I'm saying ki these things. I mean, it's not so clear cut. So they have the same Y haplogroup and distribution, but why do two countries speak Baltic languages, whereas Estonia, why does it speak a Uralic language?
Got it.
So the correlations are not so clear cut. I mean, these are for people who want to make simple cases. This might be good, but it doesn't like stand up to scrutiny. For
Right.
example,
Yeah.
even in Dravidian speakers in South India, there are so many R1A 20
Mm.
25% of them would also be R1A. Why do they speak Dravidian language? Why do they speak a Dravidian language? There
Right.
are there's R1A in Turkic speakers also. Why do they speak a Turkic language? There are some
I
R1A in Arabic people also. Why do they speak an Arabic language?
I remember the very I remember the funny contention about uh, the Indo-Aryans coming in, the supposed Aryans coming in and committing genocide and replacing what 25% of the people. Do you remember this?
Yeah, this is what they believe. I
No,
mean, all
no,
the
based on genetic evidence. This was on Twitter, right? I think one of the more popular Indian commentators has had just made this claim and was supported by some people, but they correlated present day ancestry to 25% of population replacement.
the average, firstly, an average Indian does not have 25% step ancestry. An average, probably 10 15% is the average. It's higher in the north, lower in the south.
Hmm.
There's a lot of variation. Probably what has happened is there would have been some elite mating network which would have been established. So I don't think this is some invasion scenario for which there's no evidence.
But also
And
the mathematics for what happened at that time correlated to genetics percentage today
yeah,
is it's not continuation like that. Like
no, I mean,
10% ancestry now does not mean a 10% population replacement.
yeah, it could just mean addition of population.
Uh,
It
yeah.
it does not necessarily mean that people were butchered or something. It
Not
means
only
this.
that, it could mean that there were so many like you said, the mating networks, right? It's just that they mated.
Yeah.
But yeah. Anyway, thank you again. Thanks so much. I really enjoyed this conversation, and you've got a ton of content, and I genuinely urge all of the viewers to please go through the blog. This is a relatively technical subject. I don't think Ashish should make it very easy. There's a lot of technical conversations there in terms of the genetics part, but it's a very specific aspect. The conclusions, first, I think you do the blogs very well where you lay out the conclusions from the paper that you're rebutting. So that's an easier thing to go through for the viewers if you're so inclined. And I'll link the blog posts that we've gone through in this during this blog. Do go through the actual theory of it, and this is a discussion, and everybody's free to make up their own minds. But do look at the literature that pertains to the subject. All right, thank you so much, Ashish, for joining. Thanks again. Namaste.
Thank you, Sagarika. Thank you so much.